The Old Testament reading is Genesis chapter 45, beginning with the first verse. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud, so that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed by his presence.
So Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near to me, I pray you." And they came near. And he said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, and the Lord of all his house, and ruler all the land of Egypt. Make haste and go up to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, and your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. And there I will provide for you, for there are yet 5 years of famine to come, lest you and your household and all that you have come to poverty. And now your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see, that it is my mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father of all my splendor in Egypt, and of all that you have seen. Make haste and bring my father down here."
Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck.
This is the intense emotional climax to what I always think is the Bible's greatest story. These brothers are so sorely divided from one another. They've harmed Joseph unspeakably, right? Out of their jealousy, out of their sibling rivalry. They tell their father that their favored son, that's a problem in a dysfunctional family, that their favored son has been killed. They show him the bloody garment. Many years pass, and then they come down, and Joseph, he's amazing, right, instead of giving them a thrashing, instead of bloodying their garments, Joseph forgives. Joseph says, "This is amazing. Not you did an evil thing, but God sent me here. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." Absolutely amazing, right? This is wrongs are righted, all relationships are healed. What we call this is hope. I received a lovely gift this week. I usually prefer gifts of chocolate, but I got this gift this week from a friend in our church, a quilt. The colors remind me of Joseph's multicolored garment, right? And it says hope. This is hope, right? Hope isn't tomorrow's going to be a sunnier day. Hope is that wrongs will be righted, that relationships will be healed, that in God's good time all will be well. What great drama. God's lurking behind every sand dune, behind every cactus in this story. It's absolutely amazing. Joseph sold as a slave. He rises to power in the nick of time because it turns out there's enough food in Egypt for everybody. Absolutely amazing the way God orchestrates all of this and makes it happen. The brothers don't even recognize him. He's done so well, they haven't seen him for so long. I don't know, maybe speaking Egyptian, whatever. And the tears that they shed, Joseph sends the Egyptian entourage out of the room, and he weeps out loud so that they hear it all through the palace. And I love the poignant question to his brothers who are surely fearing for their life. Joseph asks, "Is my father still alive?" They say yes. They fetch their father. They fall on each other's necks and weep. Powerful. Bible's got good stuff. We call this hope. There's no recrimination. Joseph doesn't even say, "I'll give you another chance to make it right." It's not about a second chance or a third chance or a fourth chance. Joseph just says, "God God used your evil for good. Doesn't say that God caused the evil. It says God used their evil for good. This is kind of like forgiveness. It's kind of forgiveness, although he doesn't say, I forgive you. Forgiveness is a big Christian thing, and we've forgotten about it. I think about those Amish in the year 2006 in Nickel Mines, Pennsylvania. A guy named Charles Roberts opened fire, killed children. And those Amish parents went to Charles Roberts' parents and embraced them and raised money for them. Or Wednesday, I'm going to have a conversation with Ben Witherington about the book of Revelation. Ben loves to tell the story of Corrie ten Boom, who was a prisoner during World War II. She and her sister Betsy. She watched a Nazi soldier beat her beloved sister Betsy to death. When the war was over, Corrie ten Boom went into Germany to preach the gospel. When she finished a sermon, a man came up and said, I was the guard who killed your sister. Will you forgive me? Corrie said she wanted to give him a thrashing. She didn't want to forgive him at all, but she felt God's Holy Spirit fill her, and she knew that God had forgiven her and that Jesus on the cross forgave the soldiers who had executed him, so she forgave this man. It's forgiveness in a way, but it's more than that. How do we get beyond blame, for instance? Like Joseph could blame the brothers, but instead he sees what God has been doing, the blame thing. I think about the great movie Good Will Hunting, where Matt Damon plays a troubled, brilliant, but troubled young man named Will, and he goes to his therapist, Robin Williams, played Sean McGuire. And the climactic scene comes when Will breaks down and Sean holds him, and as Will weeps, Sean says, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. So beautiful. Joseph doesn't forgive the brothers so much as they reconcile. He sees what God is doing even in the evil. It's absolutely amazing. When the Civil War was ending, someone asked Abraham Lincoln, what are you going to do to the Southerners? He said, I'm going to treat them as if they had never gone away. I will treat them as if they had never gone away. It's so interesting. Genesis says that God used the evil for good. It does not say that God caused the evil. We get mixed up about this sometimes. Something happens and we want to see God's hand in it, so we say something like, God doesn't give you more than you can bear, as if God's given you all the stuff that you have to deal with. That's not right. Or people say God needed another angel in heaven, like God looks at the angelic choir and knows, I need one more voice, I'll harm this family and take this child. That's not how that works. Or everything happens for a reason, as if God gave you cancer, you just don't know the reason. It must be a good reason. That's not it. It's not that God causes evil. God does not cause evil. God only does good. But the Bible says that God takes that evil and brings good out of it. Like, that's hope, right? It's not that we have to get our act together and do better. It's that God actually takes evil and brings good out of it. Hope doesn't depend on us getting our act together. It depends on this miraculous goodness of God. I want to talk personally about this, about how God brings good out of evil and how God can reconcile those who are not reconciled. Sometimes in preaching I talk about you guys, but lately I've just wanted to speak more for myself. We've been talking about race lately, and I'm at the point I don't want to say you're racist. I don't know what's in your soul. I know where I grew up, though, I've got some racism in me that I've got to check all the time. I grew up in a household where I was taught never say the N-word and so on. But yet I remember vividly several things, like one time my dad took a shortcut through a neighborhood that was called Black Bottom, and the car broke down, and my parents were terrified being in Black Bottom. And then I would hear things growing up like, well, for a black guy, he's pretty smart. And this, I know better, but this stuff still rattles around in me, and I've got to check it all the time, or something like white privilege. You may not have white privilege, I don't know, but I know I've had white privilege. I've had some things because I'm a white guy. My parents never went to college. We lived in a trailer when I was growing up. But being white has afforded me some advantages. It's avoided some difficulties for me. Anyway, that's not the topic for the day. I'm just speaking for myself. So when it comes to how does evil become good? How does God use evil for good? I told you in my sermon a couple of weeks ago that when I was in the 4th grade, we lived here in Charlotte, North Carolina. My dad had just retired from the Air Force, and he hadn't found the job he was going to find in Columbia, South Carolina yet, so we lived in Charlotte for years, where my mother was from, near where he was from, and I went to Tuckasegee Elementary out on the west side, and when I was on that playground, I was the shortest, skinniest little kid, and the bullies made fun of me, and what they did, they'd call me a Q. You're a Q, you're a queer. I didn't know what that was. They probably didn't even know what that was, but they called me that, and it hurt. And what I said in my sermon a couple weeks ago about that is that that was evil, that was harm, but God brought good out of it, because I forever, being someone who had been shamed and shunned, I will always stand up for whoever is being shamed or shunned. God brings good out of evil. If I have any gifts in ministry, it's not because I'm smart. I'm a pretty smart guy. I work hard. I do all that. But if I have any gifts as a pastor, it comes out of the places where I've been broken. We always talk about strengths finders and so on, but maybe we need to look inside our soul to where we've been broken, and that's where we'll discover God's giftedness, what God is calling us to. Hemingway wrote, "The world breaks everyone, and then some become strong in the broken places." So reconciliation, personally. I shared recently a blog about my father's death. My dad died on July 15th, and people swooped in with all kinds of, sympathy. You must have wonderful memories of your dad. And I appreciate every expression of care that has come my way. But I wrote in the blog that we had a tough relationship. It was really dysfunctional. It was really distant. It was tense. And now he's gone. I can't fix it now. I tried to fix it during his lifetime. I can't fix it now. And I've been reminded of a couple of things. I remember years ago I went to a funeral, and I mentioned it in a sermon. In this funeral, I saw the son of the woman who was being buried on the front row, and he had pain etched all over his face, but it wasn't the kind of pain that grieves the loss of a beloved mother. It was the kind of pain that his mother, it had been painful for him. And I remember thinking during that funeral that in God's good time, God would reconcile this son with his deceased mother, and instead of having that hardness forever etched on his face, that he would laugh. His mother would laugh. They would know great joy. I thought about this guy, Nicholas Wolterstorff, teaches at Yale, and his son Eric, 23 years old, fell to his death in an accident, and Wolterstorff wrote a beautiful book about it called Lament for a Son. And in it, one of the things that he says is this: I know that God has forgiven me for the things that I regret, but what do I do with my God-forgiven regrets? I will live with them, and I will allow them to sharpen the vision and intensify the hope for that great day when we can all throw ourselves into each other's arms and say, I'm sorry. God will surely grant us such a day. Love needs that. What I believe about my father and our failed relationship is that God's not done. God will grant us a day when we'll be able to fall on each other's shoulders like we never did in this life and say, I'm sorry, I love you, and we'll laugh. I remember my father's laughter. He used to watch Dom DeLuise on television, if you're old enough to remember that. And I don't know why. Dom DeLuise just touched my dad, and he would laugh till he cried. I look forward to the day that I'll see that laughter and those tears. Two things quickly in closing. Here's the thing. Joseph and his brothers reconcile. God does this. They can't do it themselves. We need reconciliation in our country. You know this. We are so divided in our country. Half the people think the other half are stupid morons and they're evil and they're a peril to the country. And we're so smart, and we've got to, and I try to warn you, we're so broken. And I've tried to talk about how to work on this. Listen to each other. Try to get inside the other person's experience. I don't think we're capable of reconciling, but brothers and sisters, God is capable. God's power can bring us together. There are families that they keep having squabbles over all of this stuff, and they unfriend each other on Facebook, and they don't speak, and they don't want to get together anymore, and they're glad there's a pandemic because we don't have to get together. God can make us one. We can't do it on our own, but the question is, you open to God's power to bring reconciliation, those with whom you're broken. It can happen. I think all the time about John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, bitter political rivals. But they became friends, they reconciled, and on their deathbeds, on the 50th anniversary of July the 4th, 1776, their dying thoughts were of one another. Their dying thoughts were affectionate toward one another. God can do this kind of thing even for you and the people that you're not reconciled with. And then here's the last thing. I've wondered all this week if there's such a thing as being reconciled to a year. People say, wow, 2020, what a year, the pandemic. You know, you could easily say the pandemic meant us harm. Yeah, it's hard. It's so hard. The pandemic meant us harm, but the words of Genesis would say the pandemic meant us harm, but God meant it for good. Can you reconcile with a year? It's been a hard year, but maybe God can use that year for good. That you'll look back in 10 years and you'll think, that was the year that I was humbled. That was the year that I was drawn to God. That was the year that I reconciled to the people that I didn't think I could be reconciled to. That was the year, fill in the blank. Because you see, it's all about hope. It's all about God's power. It's all about God's good end. It's not just up to us doing a little better. You want to try to do a little better? Do better this week. Yeah, please. But it's about God's power bringing good out of evil. It's about God reconciling the irreconcilable. And friends, I'm here to tell you today that it can happen. It will happen. Just got to trust it. It's got to live into it. It's got to believe it. Hope. Hope. Such a beautiful thing. Thanks be to God.